Hello from Boulder, Colorado. Welcome, and thank you for joining us for day 4 of Awaken the World, in which we're exploring the ways that we can wake up in our work. And our host for this day is Lodro Rinzler, who we're so pleased is here to open today with a live talk. Before we get to Lodro's talk, just a few things to mention as we do. The first thing, very important, we encourage you to engage with this talk by offering your comments and questions in the box towards the bottom of this page. Towards the end of Lodro's talk, he'll be responding to some of the questions that you offer. So please do that. Secondly, we'll be giving away a retreat tonight, as we're doing each night. And the way that you enter yourself, by the way, is by offering comments into the comments section. The winner of tonight's retreat is going to be attending Natural Brilliance, Leading from Within, which is led by Acharya Irene Rockwell, who's one of our presenters here on day 4. We'll be announcing the winner of last night's retreat following Lodro's talk. Finally, for everyone who doesn't win a retreat tonight, we'd like to remind you that all Awaken the World participants can use a discount code to get 10% off of meals and lodging for the retreat of your choice to come to Shambhala Mountain Center. So now I'm so glad to introduce Lodro Rinzler. Lodro's advice and relationship columns appear regularly in the Huffington Post and Mary Claire, and he's been featured in numerous publications, including Bloomberg Business Week, Real Simple, Tricycle, and the Shambhala Sun. He's the founder of the Institute for Compassionate Leadership and was also a member of Barack Obama's presidential campaign team. The former executive director of the Boston Shambhala Center, Rinzler currently teaches at the New York Shambhala Meditation Center and lectures throughout North America. He's the author of the best-selling The Buddha Walks into a Bar and the award-winning Walk Like a Buddha. He's also the author of 2 forthcoming titles, The Buddha Walks into the Office, A Guide to Livelihood for a New Generation, as well as Sit Like a Buddha, a pocket guide to meditation. And both of those titles are available this fall. And Lodro lives in Brooklyn, New York, where I believe he's joining us from tonight. So Lodro, thank you so much for being here, and please offer us some wisdom. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. So it's wonderful to be here with all of you, watching live over this thing that we call the internet. It's a real honor to be here and presenting this day on waking up through our work. And just to sort of preface this conversation, I have this belief that we really shouldn't have to separate our spirituality and our meditation practice, our religious beliefs over here, and our 9 to 5, our livelihood over here. We should actually be able to bring the two together. And the fact that we're actually spending so many of our waking hours at work means that it really is the perfect training ground for our spiritual practice. So it's an honor to say a few words about that tonight. And we have a full day worth of videos have been recorded on this very topic. Before I get into that, I want to just mention where we are in the overall Awake It in the World in conference here. We had an initial wonderful day, sort of very broad, what does it mean to be awake in the world discussion, and that was spearheaded with this wonderful dialogue between Sakyong Nipam Rinpoche and Acharya Judah Simmer Brown. And not only were the Sakyong's remarks quite inspiring, I was really touched to see how they manifested with one another and how skillfully Acharya Simmer Brown was able to work with the Sakyong and guide that particular discussion. I thought that was a wonderful example of being awake in relationship to someone else. The next day was really how do we wake up to our own bodies and our own well-being. So it was a full day on health and well-being led by Shastri Holly Gailey, who is a magnificent teacher and She spoke with many other magnificent teachers. And then yesterday was led by a dear friend of mine, Susan Piver, who talked about waking up through our relationships. And I think that's a wonderful segue to our discussions here today, because I remember at one point hearing Sakyong Nipam Rinpoche say, our whole job is to relate to people. And that's it, right? In some sense, we're all in customer service. We're all relating to people all the time. So Susan was guiding many discussions in the context of relationships in a romantic sense, but within our work environment, we have so many different types of relationships with the people that we like and get along with, the people that we may not get along with, and this giant, large number of people that we don't really think much about. But our whole job is to relate to them in a way that's authentic and a way that is mindful and compassionate. So that's our topic today. How do we use our workplace, be it a grocery store, a bank, a media company, a startup, whatever it might be, as the training ground for us to wake up? During the course of this day, you'll see many videos by these wonderful acharyas, both Irini Rockwell and Susan Shea, leading us through guided contemplations on leadership, which I think is wonderful. As was mentioned in my bio, I run something called the Institute for Compassionate Leadership, which is a near and dear project to my heart, because I've encountered so many different people who are wanting to help the world, and they're not exactly sure what it is that means to them personally. So I'll launch into this topic of personal work. What does it mean for us to find meaning in that, in what we do, in just a moment? Also in this day, there's many dialogues. There's a dialogue that I had with this wonderful writer, David Gellis, whose book comes out in 2015 called Mindful Work, on how meditation is starting to infiltrate our corporate environments and how it's become more regular and more normal in some sense than maybe even 5-10 years ago for us to introduce meditation to the workplace. There's also a conversation with Acharya Fleet Mall, who is a phenomenal being and who's leading our next day, tomorrow's conference, in terms of waking up through social action. And Fleet has done a wide variety of things, but his idea of radical responsibility for us to show up in a way that is authentic. It's quite inspiring to see that dialogue. So I encourage you to check that out. And of course, another dear friend of mine, Michael Carroll, who is the author of Awake at Work, Mindful Leader, and Fearless at Work. What does it actually mean for us to show up at our workplace in a way that is fearless and empowering? So please check out all of these videos that we have. I had a great time with all of these people, working with them so that this day had a sense of continuity in this idea of showing up. And as far as I can see in my time meditating, how we show up on the meditation cushion often manifests as how we show up in the rest of our life. So the idea that we're sitting here doing something like shamatha, calm abiding meditation, learning to be present with something as simple as the breath allows us to be present in our day-to-day life, particularly when we are facing a conflict at work, when our coworkers may be, we may find ourselves at odds with them, when we find ourselves surrounded by slander and gossip, or as I was just mentioning before, when we aren't even sure what we want to be doing for work. So I want to return to that notion because this book that just came out a month ago, The Buddha Walks into the Office, that was my attempt at talking about these issues. And it is one part, how do we actually manifest and show up in the office, but one part, how do we actually start to determine what we want to do? What is personally meaningful work for us? And I relate a story in there that I'd like to share with you now, where I was on tour for my first book, The Buddha Walks into a Bar, and I was doing a lot of speeches at universities. I was invited to give a talk at Yale a couple of years ago. And before I gave that talk, I was being shown around by a student guide. And we got coffee, and I found out that she was just about to graduate in maybe 2-3 months. And I'm always careful with people who are about to graduate, because I don't want to scare them. I don't want to say, like, what are you going to do with your life? I feel like they get enough of that. So instead, I said, have you thought about where you might want to live in a few months? Something very safe. And this person said, it's so funny that you would ask me that here while we're at a Starbucks, because I want to be the CMO, the Chief Marketing Officer of Starbucks. I thought that was very interesting. And I asked some questions, and it seemed like that was something she was very interested in, and we had a good conversation about it. I gave the talk, and then afterwards was meeting with some of the other students that were involved in the Buddhist group there, and one of them was also about to graduate. I asked the same question. We thought about where you might want to go. She said, I don't know where I want to go. And I don't know what I want to do. I know I want to help people. That's about it. And this terrifies me, but maybe I think that's okay. And I said, yes, of course, that's okay. I think any genuine answer to this is an okay answer. We talked about that for a few minutes, and ultimately, started a good conversation about what it means to help people in our work. And I held these two conversations in mind because they were so very different as I traveled around to those other places I was going, and then sat down and thought, well, this first person is holding this idea that in order for her to find her work meaningful and for her to have a sense of contentment at work, she wants to be the CMO of Starbucks. And I thought there's two ways this could play out. The first is that she spends the next several decades moving into marketing, moving into maybe the coffee industry or straight into Starbucks, and then rising in the ranks. And she could either get it or not get it. Those are the two options. And if she doesn't get it, I think after all those decades of saying, this is what I need in order to find meaningful work, she'd be very disappointed, right, if she actually didn't get the job. And then the alternative way is that she does get it, and she's the CMO of Starbucks. But I thought, gosh, what if she gets that and she realizes that she wants to be the CEO? Or what if she feels like she should be better paid, or that she's working too many hours or too stressed out? Or maybe she neglected spending time with her family along the way. Or maybe she didn't set aside the time to have a family of her own. And I thought there's a lot there that she could end up walking away, even if she gets the job, feeling somewhat dissatisfied. Alternatively, let's take the second person that I spoke with. She says, I want to help others. I don't know what that means just yet, but that's what I want to do. And I thought, God, there are thousands of ways that this person could manifest. They could become a school teacher. They could go into nonprofits. They could become a social worker. They could work in a major corporation, but be the person that stands up for the little guy all the time. And if she was holding that intention in her heart of wanting to help people, more likely than not, she would find that her work was personally meaningful. So I thought in this context, for all of us, the question maybe isn't what do you want to be when you grow up? And I want to put a pin in this for 1 second, because I also have a theory that no one ever thinks of themselves as grown up, right? It's like when you're a teenager, you think, oh, well, when I'm in my 20s, then I'll have a job and I'll be a grown up. And then when you're in your 20s, well, so maybe when I'm in my 30s, maybe I'll have a kid or something by then. That's when you're a grown up. Then your 40s, you say, God, I don't feel grown up at all. And then it continues on and on and on. And so I don't think we ever just say, now I'm grown up, right? So I think we're always in the process of growing up. We're always in the process of change. But this idea of what do we want to be when we grow up may be outdated. Instead, maybe a better question today, particularly for people who are somewhat spiritually inclined, would be, who do you want to be when you grow up, or as you grow up? In other words, what qualities do you want to cultivate in yourself through your work? And this is to return to the idea of the nonprofit that I started, the Institute for Compassionate Leadership. This is what we do with our participants. We put them through a 6-month part-time leadership training. That's part meditation and self-awareness training, part community organizing training, and part just traditional leadership skills. So that at the end of the time, people come through and they say, I know I want to help the world, and here's how. And it's been wonderful to see people get really focused on what it means to them. But it starts with this contemplation that I'm going to sort of fast forward through today, since this is a limited time. But if you're interested, I know that these videos exist for a period of time. So I'd like to invite you to slow this contemplation down and watch it at your own pace. Because normally what we would do is sit for about 5 to 10 minutes. But for now, I'd like to invite you to join me in just taking a good posture. And in this case, that means your feet firmly on the ground, or if you're seated on a cushion, you can sit with your legs loosely crossed. You don't want to lean too far back or slouch, but find a sense of balance in your seat. Once you feel grounded, we actually elongate upwards from the spine. We don't force the muscles in our back or shoulders. We allow for our natural skeletal curvature. And then resting the gaze about 2-4 feet ahead of you on the ground. Let's connect with our breath. Let's just take a moment to breathe together. Not forcing our breath in any way, allowing it to occur as it always does. We're always breathing, but the difference between now and the rest of our day is that we're actually bringing our full attention to both the out breath and the in breath. Now I'd like to ask that you actually switch the focus of your attention for a moment over to a phrase. And please contemplate with me, what are the qualities I would like to cultivate in my life? Just notice whatever answers arise in response to this question. Don't feel like you have to come up with the right answer. What are the qualities I want to cultivate in my life? What are the qualities I want to cultivate in my life? When you're ready, I'd like to ask that you take a pen and a piece of paper and just jot down some of the answers that came up during that very, very short contemplation. Once again, if you're doing this as a recording, I would recommend actually taking about 5 to 10 minutes of the shamatha come abiding practice and then maybe 3 to 4 minutes for the intention setting practice. But just right now, as I'm speaking, just jot down a few qualities and keep it short. It doesn't have to be like, well, I want to do this, and just say maybe kindness would be a quality you want to cultivate. Generosity, patience, whatever happened to come up for you personally in that practice. Please just take a moment to write it down. And then I'm going to ask a much more complex thing. I'm pulling up the Buddha Walks into the Office now, and I'm flipping. This is an exercise that's introduced here. You see here, I'd like to ask that you draw this concentric circles. And I'm showing you the book because if it's one thing I learned in my tour for this book is that I do not know how to draw concentric circles. I'm very bad at it. So I'm showing you the diagram. So on a separate piece of paper, just draw those, or if you've already started on your own, that one piece of paper, you can do it. So draw the concentric circles, and very briefly what I showed you, it's something of a primitive mandala. You might have heard of this term before. A mandala can actually be very useful as a map. And one translation of the Sanskrit word is actually circle. It's a diagram, in some sense, that's often used in Buddhism to depict the abode of a deity or a microcosm of the universe. So in some respect, it can almost be viewed as an organizational chart, and I mentioned more about this in the book, and there are many other books that detail mandalas in more depth. But for our purpose today, I'd like to ask that you draw it as I did, with one circle in the center, and then let's say maybe 4 outside of it. And what I'd like to do now is have you look at that list of qualities that you mentioned and see if one calls out to you, one that really stands out. And if so, please put that at the center of your mandala. Just write that one word in. And around it, in the other circles, I'd like to ask that you start jotting down the names of people that you care about. It could be your parents, it could be your other members of your family, your partner, your co-workers. You could start writing in things like your work, your livelihood. It could be activities that you often engage in. If you love running, you could put that in. You could put in museums, if you love to go to museums. It could be just sort of like start to map out, essentially, all these various aspects that you care about in your life. And the more important they are to you, the closer they should be to that first circle. So your dear ones, your loved ones, that might be your first circle. And then, if you only go to museums once a month, maybe that's on one of the outer ones. But whatever, just start jotting down freehand. Whatever comes up, what's going on in your life, all these various activities, people, work, what have you. So please take a moment to do that. And I just want to say, I think most of us on a bad day tend to put work at the center of our mandala. And we actually end up building out our life around that, which we may not necessarily want to do. But instead, let's start to map it out with this quality that you put in the center. So if you did kindness, for example, why don't you start drawing a line from kindness to these various people, these activities, this work. Just start drawing lines out from that center. I want you to contemplate, what if kindness was at the center of your mandala, or whatever your personal center of the mandala currently is, what would it look like in that relationship to that thing? For example, if you drew a line from kindness to your mother, who was ideally in one of those earlier circles, what would that mean? What would change in that relationship? How would you show more kindness in that relationship? Would you answer her phone calls more frequently when she called? And if so, you could even write these things down, just sort of on that line. Answer calls more, visit more regularly, whatever it might be. What does it mean, kindness to your relationship to that coworker? Kindness in relationship to your exercise? Kindness in relationship to your meditation practice? Kindness in relationship to that person you just don't get along with, that happens to be in your mandala because they're part of your life. And at your own pace, you can really start to contemplate, if you lived with kindness at the heart of who you are, that's the quality you want to cultivate in your day-to-day existence, what would shift in relationship to all of the other activity that you do? When we start to do this contemplation, we start to live in line with who we want to be, as opposed to just what we want to do. And this can help us, particularly when it comes to our livelihood. Because if we say, I want to be generous, for example, there's so many careers that we could pursue with generosity. Or we could go into our existent workplace and say, that's how I want to live my life. I want to just be generous at work. So it really is quite personal, and one's intention obviously can change. I often recommend this when people are doing resolutions at the beginning of the year. So in a couple months, if you want to revisit this exercise, you could. Instead of saying, I want to lose more weight, or I want to volunteer more, actually saying, I want to cultivate this quality this year, and committing in the year to doing that. And you sort of have a map at that point in terms of how you would do it in all these various aspects of your life. So as with all of these meditation practices we do, and obviously this is a particular exercise, not a general shamatha, but I think one thing it has in common is that it's very practical. So I hope this is a practical exercise for you. And I hope that you contemplate this question of who do you want to be, not just what you want to do at work. And I want to share one more thing, pardon my reach, because when the Buddha Walks into the Office came out, a Sangha member by the name of Jeff Wigman reached out and he sent me this beautiful painting. This sits above my, let's do this so you can see it better. There we go. This sits right above my laptop. And it's, if you can't see, it's a tortoise with a yoke, like a yoke that would go over the head of an ox. And its head is going through the yoke as it pokes up through the ocean. So this is a very traditional analogy that I'd like to invoke, which is that you don't necessarily have to subscribe to the belief of many, many rebirths, which is a very traditional Buddhist belief, but I'd like to use the example anyway. It's said that our life is very precious. And how precious is it? It's, if you can imagine, please indulge me in the visualization, that the entire world was an ocean. And on that ocean floated this yoke with a very small opening for the head. And in that ocean lived a blind tortoise. And this tortoise lived for many, many thousand years and would only surface once a century to come up and get a gulp of air before going back down into the depths of the ocean. It is said that it is more likely for this tortoise, this blind tortoise, to poke its head up and somehow get its head through this yoke floating on the surface of this ocean. It's more likely for that to happen than for us to find a precious human birth. Traditional analogy aside, even if you're like Fui on rebirth, which if you are, that's fine. Traditional analogy aside, our life is very precious. And I think we all might have a hit of that, but it's nice sometimes to be reminded that we don't have a lot of time in the grand scheme of things on this earth. So to treat our workplace not as something that we have to schlep through, something that we have to just get through so that we can live for the weekend, but as a place that we can actually manifest our spiritual life, I think is very important, so that we don't waste any time in this life. We actually use our work as a way to become more awake. So thank you so much. We have some questions, I believe. So they're going to show up on my screen right now. Aha. Okay, we've got quite a few questions. I will try to get through as many as possible. So this first question is, what method have you found to be the most effective to remaining centered while working in a high energy environment like an office in a city? So I'm going to give 2 quick tips that I offer in the Buddha Walks into the Office. And as I mentioned, I was on this tour and I actually went to a lot of offices and started talking to people about these things. And they said that it was actually very effective for them, so I hope it's helpful for you as well. The first is something that I do personally, which is I take a timer. I set my phone and I put it down while I'm working, because I'm the sort of person that will work sort of one-pointedly for a long period of time. But the timer will go off every half hour or every hour, depending on how I set it. And whenever that happens, I'm often like slouched over the computer like this. I imagine maybe you are as well. I turn off the timer, I raise my posture in the same way that I would if I were sitting in meditation. I raise my gaze above the laptop, or I close the laptop. And I come back to the breath, the same way that we did earlier tonight. 30 seconds, a minute may pass. And then having come back to center, set the timer again for a half hour, an hour, however long, and go back to work. And this cuts through the habitual speed that I think a lot of us carry around with us, where we often get distracted very quickly. It actually brings us back and focused in the present moment. And when we're actually present, we actually start to see things that we may not have seen before. We start to see how we can respond in the most skillful manner. So I think this is a very practical thing. The second thing I want to mention is the very first meditation exercise that I ever received. I was 7 years old, maybe. And a gentleman known as Robin Trail told me that what I could do, and you can do this too, is get these little sticker dots. They're red stickies that are often put on folders to mark them. You can get them at any stationery store. But what you do here is that you actually take these little stickies and you put them up around the office. Or if you prefer, around your home. Honestly, they're small enough that most people aren't really going to notice. So you could get away with putting them up around the office. But the trick is, every time that you see one out of the corner of your eye, you have to stop in that same way. And come back to center. Come back to your posture, to your breath. Just take a pause, like it's a little stop sign. And then go back to what you were doing. So I think these are two things that I've found to be effective in order to just keep coming back to center while working in a high energy environment. I hope they are helpful for you as well. Okay, so this next question is, any tips for how to practice at work, especially showing your boss compassion in a professional way? I would say more often than not, I hear that people's bosses are jerks. It's like, I don't know how to have compassion for this person because they sort of dominate any office situation, and it's really quite horrible how they manifest. And one of the contemplations I think is really helpful and has been helpful for me is to keep coming back to the idea of just like me. And you can do this as part of your formal sitting practice. You set a timer and you say, okay, I'm doing my sitting for 10 minutes, and then you can set another timer for 3 to 4 to 5 minutes. And start with the basic contemplation around this person and all of the things that they do that make them happy. My boss loves to spend time with her kids, just like me. You add just like me at the end of each of these statements. My boss, is just trying to get by, just like me. If that's all you can come up with, that's fine. But gradually, you can even work your way over to some of the more difficult things. My boss continues to promote themselves and slander others, just like me. And you may not be doing this on a regular basis, but you might have done it in the past, and you know what that's like. You know the pressure that comes with it, and you know that, sometimes maybe you're a little bit loose with your speech, whatever it might be. And you just acknowledge that you've been there, and you know what that feels like, even if you haven't done it recently. My boss freaks out when there's a really fast approaching deadline, gets too speedy, just like me. So the more we start to do this over the course of a few minutes, the more we realize that we actually have common ground with this person. And the idea of compassion, you mentioned compassion here. Compassion isn't, I'm up here and I'm more spiritually advanced than you down here. It's actually based in empathy, which is saying we're all the same. It's, I understand how I suffer, and then I start to notice how other people suffer. And when we do that, it's not us feeling sympathy, like I feel bad for them. It's, I know what that's like, so I can have empathy for them. That is compassion. That's where we meet people. So compassion, in a sense, is noticing where we can meet this person and how we actually manifest in similar ways. And then as a result, our heart opens naturally to them. So I hope that's helpful. Interesting. So I'm sort of like going through these rapid fire. The next question is, are you concerned that bringing meditation to the workplace may be covering up the root causes of stress? What about systemic change? And I love this because I hope that you check out the conversation I had with David Gellis, who wrote Mindful Work, because he spent so much time really looking at how meditation is being introduced in the offices. Whereas I'm sort of a meditation teacher, and I've been going into office environments. There are a lot of corporations that have said, what we should do, we should meditate. And I asked him, are you worried that maybe it's not always being well introduced? And he reminded me, and I love this, he looked me in the eyes and goes, in my experience, the Dharma takes care of itself. And I really do love that. And so I'm less concerned having spoken with David Gellis, because I do think that, particularly with this meditation practice, that if people do it earnestly and they're introduced to it well, they might come in with one intention. Oh God, I'm so stressed out, I want to meditate. But I've often encountered, even within Shambhala centers, when I teach a meditation everyday life class or a contentment everyday life, people come in and I ask them what's their intention in learning how to meditate. And they might say that. I'm really stressed out and I don't know how to work with my emotions. But then 5 weeks in, all of a sudden they're saying, I actually just started feeling really tender. My heart's really tender and I'm starting to notice suffering in the people around me. It's no longer just about them. And this blossoming of what in the Buddhist tradition we call bodhicitta, an awake or open heart, has manifested in a way that I often find unexpected in how quickly it does. So I'm not worried, because I do think the Dharma takes care of itself. And I think the idea of introducing meditation to people who may not normally be exposed to it, if it's introduced authentically and genuinely, I found that it actually opens people up in a way that is really quite powerful and allows them to be vulnerable in a way that they may not normally have been willing to be at work. So I do think this is quite lovely. And I do think you asked about systemic change. I think this is how systemic change happens. It's one person showing up in a way that is countercultural to everything else around them. So if you're that one person that meditates in the office and you are showing up more vulnerably with an open heart and offering space in your own presence in an authentic way to your coworkers, that has an effect. And on our first day, Sakyong Mipam Rinpoche talked about how do we affect a society? And this is it, I think. We affect a society by showing up in a way that might be different and countercultural, in a way that cuts through the aggression and the speed around us. So I hope that is helpful, and I do think meditation can be very helpful in that regard. The center of my mandala is space. I always seem to be freaking out, running late, poor time management. Any advice? I think, there's something aspirational about the exercise we did, where we may need to work on that quality. And one way that we could do that is through doing this in the morning and in the evening. So if your intention is space, I would say wake up in the morning and say, is this my intention today? What does that mean? Think through, you can open up your calendar, whatever. And you say, what does it mean to introduce space into these aspects of my day? And it might mean, as you say, working with time management. It might mean just being willing to practice. It might mean listening very deeply and not just responding quickly. So think through what space would look like in what is going on that day. And say, okay, that's my intention today. You set that, and then you go throughout your day. And if you want, you could even take that. If it's space, you could take it as a Post-it. You could put it on your wall. You could have it as a background of your computer. You could set a reminder on your phone that every hour it pops up into space, just so that you're constantly reminded of what your intention is for that given day. And then in the evening, you can reflect back. As you're brushing your teeth, for example, you say, how did I do today? Maybe there are a couple times that you weren't able to interject space in a way that you hadn't before. And if so, that's quite wonderful and worthy of rejoicing. It's actually lovely. And if not, tomorrow's another day. Tomorrow's another opportunity for us to take advantage of our precious human life and cultivate that quality. So I hope that's helpful in terms of making space more a part of your day-to-day life. So bringing it out in the morning and then booking and ending it in the evening. And, don't beat yourself up if you were like day 2 in and you still haven't, you feel like you're still not spacious at all. These things take time. So being very gentle with yourself as you start to build out that mandala with your quality that you want to cultivate. So, sorry, this is quite long. Okay, I guess unless Kaylee, there's any other questions, I think our final one tonight would be better to meditate and be late to work or skip meditation and be on time. I'm reminded, I think that we should try and build out time to meditate in the morning or in the evening. I'm just going to run through 4 ways that we could actually build out that space for meditation in the way that may be helpful so that we're not making an either-or decision. But I'm reminded first of something that Sakyong Mipam Rinpoche often says, where he says, if we're sitting down on the meditation cushion and we're just spacing out, it's like we might as well be waiting for the bus. And to flip that around, if you get to the bus station or the train stop or whatever it is, and you've got all of a sudden you just missed the train, you can actually sit down for 10 minutes and meditate until the next one comes. So there's ways to sort of build out the meditation throughout our day. In the way that I mentioned before, you can even set that timer so that you've got regular injections of a minute or two of sitting throughout the day. But I want to just mention 4 quick tips for how to get a meditation practice going for those of you who are new to it and really trying to make this consistent. And I should mention, I don't know if I have no idea what's like below me in terms of my bio or anything, but I'm offering a online course through my publisher Shambhala Publications called Sit Like a Buddha, which is really just about how to establish a regular meditation practice, because I found that easy to introduce the practice, but often people need a little bit more of like a week-by-week container to get going. So that's what we're doing. That's the whole point of this 6-week class that we're offering called Sit Like a Buddha. So if you're interested, you could go to shambhala.com/sitlikeabuddha and learn more about that. But I'm going to give you a preview of the 4 tips that I find really helpful in getting a consistent practice going. And the first one, they're all consistency. It's like me saying consistency 4 times in a row. But the first one is a consistent amount of time. So if you're looking to, you've only got a little bit of time before you rush off to work, 10 minutes a day is actually really wonderful. 10 minutes a day is phenomenal, in fact. And honestly, we all have 10 minutes a day. So even if you are rushing off to work and you can't do it right then, you can do it at the end of the day, if that's more when you have that time. But if you can get up 10 minutes earlier, that's often quite good. And one thing I want to say here is don't mess with that. If you say, I'm going to do 10 minutes, set your timer for 10 minutes. And that means when you're really frustrated, you want to leap off the cushion because you're not with the breath, and it's been 3 minutes, stay for 10 minutes. And that means that when you've been sitting for 10 minutes and then your timer goes off and you feel really wonderful and you've been totally with the breath, get up and just say, that was my 10 minutes. Don't sit for longer. Because what we do in those situations is we're starting to say, this is a bad meditation session, this is a good meditation session. What we're doing here is we're just learning to meditate. We're becoming more familiar with who we are. So don't feel like you have to judge your sessions in that way. Just sit for the amount of time that you normally sit for. So 10 minutes a day is good. The second thing I want to mention is a consistent time of day. So if you have trouble where you're constantly running off to work and you don't feel like you have time, do it right when you get back from work. Do it right before bed. Wake up a little bit earlier. Do it right when you roll out of bed so that you don't check your email and lose all track of time and then you're late for work. Finding that consistent time of day for you is wonderful, and then building it in so it becomes a habit in a good way. For me, I wake up, I shower, I get dressed, I walk the dog, I put on my coffee, and then I sit. And it becomes as routine for me as brushing my teeth, right? It's just part of what I do in the morning. So I think that's really a good thing to do, to sort of build it in so it becomes as routine as brushing your teeth or taking a shower. And 10 minutes is not that long, so we could do that. The third thing I want to mention is a consistent environment. Over my shoulder, you could actually sort of see there's a little shrine there. You don't have to have a full shrine. You could have a cushion. You could have an image that inspires you. You could have a Buddha statue. You could have a candle. You could have an incense burner. But it's helpful to have something consistent there that denotes this is where I go to meditate. So that we're not constantly rearranging our space all the time and trying to find where we can do it. So finding that consistent space is really important. And then the fourth and final thing is consistent pacing. And it said that if you do anything 11 days in a row, your brain fires differently. It starts to become more habit forming. So it could be quitting smoking, it could be writing every day. But if we meditate for 11 days in a row, it starts to become more habitual. It becomes normal. Then when we skip a day, it feels weird that we haven't been doing it. So 11 days in a row at 10 minutes a day, that's right around 2 hours, which is not a major time commitment if this is something that you really want to launch. And instead, after 21 days, it's like a fully formed habit. So I encourage you, if you're interested in getting meditation practice going, to do that. And I hope that it seeps into your work life in a really positive way, and that you are able to relate to others with an authentic presence, with an open heart and with a real sense of what qualities you want to cultivate in this training ground that we call work. So please check out all the other videos that we have in this umbrella of waking up through work. And tomorrow is, as I said, Acharya Fleet Mall, who is an incredibly inspirational human being. And he's talking about how we wake up through social action, how we wake up through service. And I hope that you tune in for that, because that is such an important topic. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a lovely night.
So thank you so much, Lodro. We're so appreciative that you've taken time to show up here and for offering us such practical, clear wisdom. So very appreciative, and I'm sure lots of people out there are appreciative. As Lodro mentioned, there are ways that you can stay connected to his teachings and explore further, including picking up the book, The Buddha Walks into the Office, which is available now through Shambhala Publications. And also, as Lodro mentioned, he's going to be leading a course called Sit Like a Buddha, and that's also offered through Shambhala. And you can find information about that on the Day 4 page of Awaken the World, just below the recording of Lodro's video. And you can also go to the Shambhala Publications website to learn more about that. So please do engage further with Lodro's work. And I guess more immediately, check out the other dialogues that he was a part of in Awaken the World. Some amazing stuff, which are available now. You can just follow the link on this page to the page that contains all of the additional videos, and they'll be up on that page for 48 hours. And after that, they'll all be available to you in the resource package that we're offering for purchase, which also contains all of the videos from the other days, all of the live presentations, guided meditations, everything, and it's full of beautiful, helpful stuff, and additional things, additional sessions that weren't offered in these 6 days will be there as well. So please look into that. We really think the resource package is going to be helpful for people, and we've put a lot into it, and it's helpful for you, and it's also helpful for Shambhala Mountain Center. If you purchase it, it really allows us to continue doing things like this online and on the land. And if you purchase that over the course of these 6 days during the event, you'll get it at a reduced price. And following this, it'll still be available for purchase. If you're really connecting with what we're doing here and you're finding it helpful, please also consider donating to Shambhala Mountain Center. We're a nonprofit organization, so your donation will be tax deductible. There's a button on this page, and there's always a button on shambhalamountain.org. So, of course, that form of support is necessary and deeply appreciated. So thank you for considering that. Now, a bit of generosity from our side in announcing the winner of last night's retreat, which is a retreat led by Susan Piver, who was our host yesterday. The winner of the Fearlessly Creative Writing Retreat is Barbara Holman. Barbara, you'll be getting an email from us soon with details as far as how to move forward and claim your retreat and come up and see us on the mountain. So we hope to see you very soon. As Lodro mentioned, Fleet Mall is our host tomorrow, and tomorrow's broadcast is going to be full of really powerful, wise stuff as well. As well as Acharya Fleet Mall, we have Roshi Joan Halifax, Roshi Bernie Glassman, Angel Kudo Williams, the guided meditation from Acharya Daniel Hesse. So some really heavy-hitting teachers that we're just thrilled to be able to present. And following that, day 6, which is on Friday, is going to be an interreligious dialogue that's co-sponsored by Naropa University, and we'll be broadcasting from Naropa here in Boulder, Colorado. That's going to feature 6 teachers from different religious traditions who are going to be discussing livelihood and the spiritual path. So very much related to what we were talking about tonight, but you'll get some, a wide variety of perspectives. So please tune into that as well. And we hope you have a wonderful night and that you enjoy some of the additional videos that are available. Thank you so much.